I've always liked having a small business. I like doing the sales. I like being the one that's involved. But I realized that if that's what I want to do, that's fine. But I at least need to have some other stream of income going on that's not 100% dependent on me.
You're listening to Flip Empire, the show committed to helping real estate entrepreneurs who want to build their empire without sacrificing their life. Your success and freedom starts now with your host, Alex Pardo.
Welcome back, guys. This is the first episode after the 8-year anniversary of the podcast, The Flip Empire Show. We just celebrated on episode 750. So on today's podcast, I got my buddy Mark Lane, who is just an awesome dude and a great investor out of Des Moines. And, on this podcast, Mark gets extremely vulnerable. And I'm not going to reveal too much, but he shared a story at the beginning of this podcast that I want you guys to listen to. And I want you to approach this from the perspective that this could happen to anybody. And have you structured and created the business in a way that can go on with or without you? Have you lined up certain things in place? Just to give you a little bit of background and context, Mark used to be a factory worker and now is a multimillionaire real estate investor. He focuses on wholesaling, and he's got a single family rental portfolio, which he talks about on today's podcast. He's also the author of More Leads, More Deals, More Profits, The Insider Secrets of Real Estate Millionaires, which you guys can check out on Amazon. And, Mark got started way back in 2008 when the financial crisis happened, bought his first house in 2010. And then, fast forward 9 years, in 2019, he bought 110 houses. And similar to me, he realized that he didn't want to scale. He didn't want a large business. So he actually downsized his business and got more profitable in the process. So I think you guys are going to get a lot out of today's podcast episode. But before we dive into it, Storage Wins is growing and thriving. If you guys want to transition from single family into storage, or maybe you want to add storage as an arm or a branch to your existing business so that you could generate more cash flow, build more wealth, have more time freedom, head over to www.storagewins.com. Take a few minutes to apply. And if I like what you have to say, we'll schedule a call to talk. So with that being said, guys, let's hop into episode 751 with my buddy, Mark Lane. Mark, how are you, my friend? Dude, round 2 here on the Flip Empire Show. And brother, I always, I've shared this with you in the past, man, but I always enjoy connecting with you. I love every time you post something on Facebook, dude. I'm reading, I'm engaging because not only do I feel like you and I have a very similar mindset, but I feel like you are kind of cut from a little bit of a different cloth, at least as it relates to a lot of the thought leaders and content creators in the real estate investing space. You have a little bit of a different mindset when it comes to building a business, wealth, living our lives first, and not always just chasing money and more and more and more. So, dude, I'm excited to connect with you, man. I feel like I always learn something when we engage, and I'm really excited to just kind of get into your story, because I think there's a lot of fruit that people can gain from your experience, man, and your knowledge. So happy to have you back on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, man. So look, why don't we do this? You and I just talked about this a couple of minutes ago, but guys, for those of you who don't know Mark Lane, he and I met at a high-level mastermind probably 4 or 5 years ago, I want to say, around there. And just somebody who's just down-to-earth dude, successful real estate investor, doesn't just walk the walk, but or talk the talk, but he walks it, right? Like, he's built a successful business. He's done a lot of deals. And he and I just connected at that mastermind. And I had him back on the show probably a couple of years ago. So we'll definitely link that up in the show notes. But Mark had literally a life scare, something that completely flipped his world upside down. And I'm going to bring him into the conversation here so he can share with you something very personal. And knowing Mark, he'll be vulnerable and transparent. And there's a purpose to the story. So not only do I want you to just lean into every word he shares, but I want you to gain how the experience that Mark went through, how you can apply that, and think about if you were in those shoes, would you have certain things lined up? Have you structured and created a business the way that you want it? how would your family be? So like, I'm not going to give away too much, but I want you to kind of view Mark's story through that lens. And don't worry, we're going to get into like Mark's a ninja when it comes to just lead generation and building wealth. And the guy knows anything from wholesaling to just buy and hold. He's a wealth of knowledge here. We're going to get to some of that stuff, but I want to start this podcast a little different than I do most of them. Mark, brother, you and I were talking again, I don't know, 5-10 minutes ago about your health. And I remember you shared something on Facebook, I want to say September, October, somewhere around that. And I've always you've always been super fit, super healthy, take care of yourself, you work out. From what I can gather, you eat well. Mm-hmm. And then something happened. Can you kind of like what was it that completely flipped your world upside down?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, to give some perspective. So I used to compete in bodybuilding, did some powerlifting, working out was part of my life. I mean, it was, or in some ways it was my life. It's what I looked forward to more than anything. So I was always fit, always lean, jacked, all that stuff. So that to become unhealthy for a period of time was a completely different shift in life. So it originated, I believe, from the divorce I had in December of 2019. Very rough divorce. It wiped me out financially, took a lot of time away from my daughter, who, we're super close. I love that time with her. And so it's just emotionally as draining as it could possibly be, and everything else. So I would say it stripped my identity, because my identity was a family man, a husband, a father, wealthy, all those things, and it stripped it all away. So it was just massively impactful in a negative way. And so symptoms had started in right after the divorce happened, or even when I was going through it, where, I just have extreme fatigue. We're talking I would feel it on the inside. I would be chasing energy drinks, as much caffeine as I could down. None of it would make a difference. And over the course of a couple years, it seemed to get just a little bit better. And I ended up going to the doctor, one point where I'm it just kind of hit again. I'm man, what is going on? This can't be depression. At least I didn't think it was. Went to the doctor and they said it was depression. They tried to put me on prescription, and I just didn't feel right about taking it. I didn't feel in my heart that that's what was the problem. So I literally was at the pharmacy, had been holding the bottle of pills, and it was kind of like a movie where the pharmacist is, they're kind of talking to me and they're telling me how to take and all that, and I'm just kind of blocking that out, and I'm playing all these reels in my mind of all the things that I had done to grow as an individual, the reading and the investing into myself and the business and the audio CDs and all these things I had built up, and I wasn't doing any of those anymore. And I had kind of just started taking life for granted a little bit. Started getting a little bit comfortable, a little bit lazy. And so I said, you know what, I'm not gonna take the prescription until I know that if I do these things and those don't work, then I'll consider the prescription. Okay. So I went back, I jumped back into reading every day, pouring back into myself, working out all the time. And so for about the next 6 to 7 months, my life got way better really quick. Okay. So this is kind of before the crash happened. But I want to give a little bit of prelude into how it took place. So it was, I'd say, about May to June of 2022 up through end of October 2022. I decided, the best thing I could possibly do for myself to get myself regimented again is to get myself back onto a strict diet, get myself back onto a strict workout plan, all things I had experienced earlier in my life. And so I did that. And over the course of that 6-7 months, I got down to, I think it was 6.7% body fat. I was super lean, went from 216 down to 186, I believe. So dropped a lot of weight. What I didn't realize is, even though it was good for me in some ways, it was taxing my system that much more by taking it to that extreme. So we get to end of 2022, I started getting this really bad head pressure. like this brain fog that just wouldn't go away no matter what I did. Didn't matter if I took time off. The only time it would seem to get a little bit better was from a workout. Probably just to do some endorphins and stuff getting released. So it gets into 2023, beginning of 2023, I started having like heart palpitations, started having some chest pressure, went to the doctor. They sent me to the cardiologist, did all the tests. He said, everything looks good. By mid 2023, I had like the most intense head pressure, point to where I could only work a couple hours a day. And it was starting to like really impact my life. Head pressure, palpitations. I was starting to have a little numbness in one of my hands, and ended up getting a brain MRI done. That was clear. They said it looks great. Did all blood work. Went to the hospital twice. Blood work was all great. So we get into about it was September of 2023, and I had my daughter for 3 days while like her mom was gone. My girlfriend at the time was gone. My mom was out of town. My stepdaughter, who is my assistant in my business, was out of town. Like everybody that I would depend on for help was gone. And I had like the worst fatigue I'd ever experienced in my entire life for 3 days straight. I remember being at Target with my daughter. I had to take her there for a couple things. I'm just like barely getting through, just walking through it. And I look at a mirror must not have looked in the mirror the last couple of days before that. And I just had like terrible, like black circles under my eyes. I'm like, something's wrong. And it was point, I couldn't get off the couch. I couldn't make dinner. Like it was intense. So going into Monday, I had to go back to work as a real estate investor, had to go back and start checking on my rehabs. And next thing I know, I go to the first house in the morning and I couldn't even unlock the door with one hand. Like I couldn't, my hands were so cramped up and weak that I couldn't even open the door with one hand. And then as I'm walking down the stairs, I noticed that my legs were so weak. It felt like they were going to collapse. Like I couldn't hardly hold myself up. And I noticed as I would try to have a conversation, I'd be stuttering. And so I called my doctor. She's like, I think you need to go to the hospital. You might be having a stroke. I said, I'm not having a stroke. She's like, well, how do you know? I said, well, because everything I'm experiencing, I've been telling you about for the last several months. It's just now it's escalating really fast and I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, can you get me in a neurologist? She's like, Mark, it's going to take months to get into a neurologist. So literally nothing nobody I could go see to solve the problem. We'd already been through as much testing as possible. Next thing you know, from that Monday through that Friday, it just got continuously worse, to the point to where by Friday, I was at a grocery store with my girlfriend at the time, and I had a complete shutdown physically, emotionally, mentally. Like I had never experienced anything like it, where I was walking through the grocery store with her, and it was almost kind of like, it's like my spirit had left my body. And I'm not trying to get like spiritual on us, but it was just an experience I can't hardly explain, where I was so empty physically and emotionally, to where it's like I just didn't hardly feel like I was existing. It was so odd. But I'm sitting there in the grocery store and I'm just started like crying and like sobbing. My girlfriend's like, what's going on? I'm like, I said I only feel like I have a couple days left, and I feel like within a week I'm going to be incapacitated, like in a coma, something like that. Like I didn't feel like I had more than a couple days left of functionality. My mental state was deteriorating that fast to where I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't process anything. I had no short-term memory. It was absolutely horrid. So that led into multiple things. Started having severe muscle twitches throughout my whole body. We thought maybe I had ALS. That led on for several months. Still have them a little bit today, but they're much better. So so was having severe insomnia, massive weight loss. Got to the point to where, when people would come over, they would think like he's dying, like he's sick, something's happening. Like all my bones were hanging out. Severe dizziness, fatigue, you name it, it was going on. So bottom line is we found out that I had severe adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is basically like your endocrine system shuts down, for lack of better words. And it's a stress response. So having gone through that divorce, having put myself through that super rigorous exercise regimen, shut me down. And with adrenal fatigue, you have your cortisol in your body, and your cortisol is your health hormone. Most people don't even understand what cortisol really does. Cortisol is your energy and your health hormone. Without cortisol, you die. You do not live. So with adrenal fatigue, your cortisol raises over a period of time to basically protect you. Because like anytime you're in a stressful situation, your cortisol will elevate to protect you until your parasympathetic nervous system can rise back up and kind of bring you back down to a level state. So when you're going through some type of a trauma, your cortisol stays elevated. And what happens is over a course of time, it starts to burn out, and your body might still be able to produce cortisol, but it kind of like goes into hiding as a way to protect itself. And so while that cortisol is not producing the way it's supposed to, your body's not absorbing it, a massive array of symptoms happen. So all that had happened, basically from mid-September through end of December. And that's when I finally realized went to a neurologist. He's like, you do not have ALS, you're not dying. And it's about the same time frame we started to realize what it was. And so finally I was able to at least mentally adjust and say, okay, like I'm not dying finally. Like now I can kind of get back to living again and just start focusing on healing.
Yeah. Wow. Whew, that's heavy, man. There's a lot of questions bouncing around in my head and things I want to try to unpack here. So first of all, thank you, man. I honor you for sharing that story. It was gripping. And as you were sharing it, I'm kind of putting myself in your shoes and being the father of two girls. And yeah, man, and you and I, for context, guys, like Mark, if you don't know him or haven't seen him, young, healthy male. Right. Like I don't know how old you are, but my guess would be somewhere in the 35 to 45 range. Like you're a young dude.
Yeah. 46.
Yeah. 46. Okay. So, and you look younger than 46. So young, healthy man. And so I appreciate you sharing the story. There's a lot of questions I want to ask you, but let me start here just to kind of start to like frame the conversation a bit.
Yeah.
During that time, I got to imagine, I think you said at one point you weren't working more than a couple of hours a day. When you got into October, November, December, where things started to like deteriorate rapidly, were you spending any time on work? Like, was it pretty much just all focused on your health at that point?
Yeah, almost. I couldn't even, to put it in perspective, sometimes I couldn't walk past the driveway. So I couldn't go like work. I couldn't make calls. I didn't have the ability to communicate. Like you're hearing me communicate sounds normal, right? Back then it was jumbled. It was confusion. I couldn't get my words out because I couldn't even figure out the words I wanted to use. So it was just chaos. So yeah, basically from when that started, September through even a little bit into January, probably beginning to mid-January, I probably worked maybe 2 to 3 hours per week.
How were you able to live, pay the bills, etc.? Did you have assets you could lean on? Like talk me through like how you were able, at least financially, to bridge that gap so that it would allow you to focus on your health.
Well, thankfully we had a little bit of a pipeline of some deals that were on the market to be sold. So that helped. Two, had some cash, had a little bit of cash cushion. So that helped. And then we do have some rental properties too that don't really, I mean, if it were just me and I weren't trying to also provide for my stepdaughter, who's an employee, I could live off of those. But I'm also paying for her labor and everything. We completely shut our marketing down because we didn't want to be spending money on marketing if I couldn't service the calls. But we still had to pay her payroll and all that stuff, insurance, all those miscellaneous bills. So it was kind of a combination of relying on cash, a pipeline, but it made me realize. And sorry, I got somebody mowing right behind me.
No, you're good.
It made me realize that I need more cash flow, and maybe most certainly made me realize that. And it never hurts to be in a cash position. So when you are in a life altering moment, you're going to rely on cash. So I realized like I was in a better cash position up until maybe a couple of years ago. I got really aggressive on some rental properties, spent a lot of money out of pocket to acquire those. And I was kind of like, oh, like probably wasn't a very good decision. I had learned about my lesson a little bit there where it's better to stay. I would say it's best to not assume that everything's going to go right. Because when you least expect it is when things will go wrong, and you don't want to be caught with your pants down and no cash.
That's right. That's right. There's a saying, I think, I don't want to butcher it, but I heard recently on a podcast, like especially in the economic environment that we're in right now, like when the tide goes out, you're going to see who was swimming naked, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's going to have a different perspective or number, but generally speaking, now that you've kind of gone through this, is one of the takeaways from hearing your story is what you just shared is cash flow and cash.
Yeah.
Right. Making sure that you have those two things in the event of some life altering event. Right. It could be a death in the family. It could be something to your health. Like in your case, Mark, how much cash would you say people need to have? And obviously everybody has a different lifestyle, different expenses, but do you subscribe to the kind of the Dave Ramsey thought process of 6 months worth of emergency or 6 months worth of expenses in your emergency funds? Do you think it should be more? Like, what would you suggest or advise people that might not be liquid right now, might not be in a strong cash position? What's the formula for you?
I would say, 6 months personal and 6 months business, minimum. And I would say, just depending on your operations, it might make sense to go heavier. So we're very lean. It's only myself and one employee. Yep. So once we cut our marketing costs out, we're very, very lean. And I could even cut my salary completely out if I wanted to, because I can rely on my rental properties. Yeah. So that means we could technically as a company survive without it falling apart off of $10,000 a month. Right. So very, very lean. Yeah. So we may not really need to be any more than 6 months in business reserve. Whereas a company that has $100,000 a month in overhead, that like it's going to strip a lot of cash very fast. So with that being said, I also realized I probably want to get my business built up in a way to where my business keeps paying me, to where my business keeps performing and making profit without me having to be the one doing it. Very, very good lesson there. I've always liked having a small business. I like doing the sales. I like being the one that's involved. Yeah. But I realized that if that's what I want to do, that's fine. But I at least need to have some other stream of income going on that's not 100% dependent on me.
That's right. That's right. And that's actually, so that's where I was going next is one takeaway is make sure you have cash. The second takeaway is assets that produce cash flow, right? And the third thing is your business structured in a way that it can continue to produce revenue with or without you? I remember you and I were talking before the show how I transitioned from single family wholesaling into storage back in 2020. And in 2020, when I shut down the operation, it was a very sobering reality that all these years, Mark, I had built this wholesaling business that wasn't sellable at all. Mm-hmm. Now, while I was able to sell off some assets of the business, list, things of that nature, and generate some revenue that way, I certainly didn't build a business that can be sold.
Right.
And man, it just really made me think. I said, okay, well, going forward, if I'm going to build a business and take the time and energy required to do so, even though I might not have any intention of one day exiting or selling, built it so that it can be sold.
Yeah.
There's a really good book. I'm forgetting the author, which somewhere back here, called Built to Sell. It's like a blue, white, and black book. Really good book. I highly recommend. I'm currently in the process of reading Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time. And he talks some about that. Really important, guys, that ask yourself, are you building a business that can be sold, or can just operate without you? And generally speaking, I find that if it can operate without you, it can likely be sold. Hey there, stop. I promise to get you back to the show, but let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you happy with the money that you're making in your real estate business? Are you generating any cash flow? Are you building wealth? Do you feel like you're making progress? Or are you just constantly chasing deals and going after the next transaction and the next transaction? Well, I can tell you from personal experience that there's an easier way, and it's not with single family homes. I believe that self-storage is the best asset class in real estate, hands down, because we're not dealing with tenants, toilets, there's automation, it's a recession-resistant asset class, and it's a business that has the benefits of real estate. If what you're ultimately after is cash flow, building wealth, and time freedom, I want to invite you to just take a few minutes to apply. Go to www.storagewins.com, where you can learn more about our Storage Wins coaching program. And I can help you generate cash flow from your first storage facility within the next 6 to 12 months without needing to use your money or even needing any experience. So head over to www.storagewins.com. And if we like what you have to say, we'll schedule a call. And I look forward to connecting with you. Now back to the show. How are you now thinking about business, Mark? How are you going about building your business so that it can operate without you? Maybe you want to go on vacation for 6 months with your daughter-in-law. Maybe, God forbid, maybe you're dealing with something else that requires you to step away from the business. Like, walk us through how you're thinking about that and what you're doing from a practical standpoint to start building the business in a way that, hey, it's not all reliant on Mark Lane.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is I'm getting even more focused on buying assets, and I was before too. For the last, I don't know, at least the last 3 to 5 years. But now it's kind of like everything we make, for the most part, needs to be for the only reason of buying assets.
Yeah.
Like, look at cash as the only reason for cash is income producing asset money. Like that's the purpose of it.
Yeah,
make money, buy assets. Make money, buy assets. So we're like, I accomplished, as of literally yesterday, accomplished my 1 year's goal of buying single family rentals in less than 6 months.
Wow.
Just because I'm hyper focused on it now. So, I'm still wholesaling. We haven't really expanded the team all that much, but the assets are growing faster and faster and buying really good quality assets. So, I would say that's the biggest thing so far. But we are, like, just had a conversation yesterday about starting to hire a full-time leads manager. My assistant already handles that. She does well, but we're starting to see some gaps there where we're like, okay, we can kind of start to fill in there a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we're like, I'm also part of Strategic Coach, joined that, actually started beginning of this year, but that's helped me have some mindset shifts too, as far as like the highest and best use of my time and the best uses of my skills.
Yeah.
So like currently it's like mostly on sales. Like that's meeting with sellers. Like I shouldn't really be doing much else in my business. So we're working on anything that I'm doing, outsourcing it, have my assistant take over, hiring somebody else to handle it so that I can focus 100% on the sales side. And then eventually, if we find that there's maybe even a higher use, then we'll start to bring somebody in to handle the sales.
Yeah. And are you talking about, because by the way, Dan Sullivan, I've never been a part of Strategic Coach, but 2 of my favorite books are authored by he and Benjamin Hardy.
Yeah.
Who Not How, Gap and Gain.
Yeah.
I mean, love those books. There's another one that I'm drawing a blank on right now that I think they co-authored together. But I know Dan Sullivan talks about, I learned about the genius zone, figuring out your unique ability, and genius zone. Is that kind of, did you go through that exercise to ultimately hone in and realize like, hey, the highest and best use of my time? What Dan Martell, he talks about the drip matrix. You have delegation in the top left corner. You have replacement at the bottom. You have investment, and then you have production. The bottom right corner, that production, is what you're talking about, which is meeting with sellers that probably gives you energy, and it's also income producing. It also generates revenue. Is that right?
Right. Yep.
Okay. And then everything else would either fall in the delegation, replacement, or investment. So investment is like a book you're reading, a mastermind you join. Mm-hmm. It might not produce money for you today, but it's an investment in yourself and in your business. So highly recommend you guys check out that book. So dude, that's huge, man. So it sounds like the idea and the focus is to stay lean, but you're not just wholesaling to generate income. You're wholesaling to then grab that income and put it into the vehicle that for you works, which is building a single family rental portfolio.
Yep, exactly.
Okay,
so we're building. I expect we'll have about another 5 years of building that up, and then I might go into something else. I might keep building it. I might go into pay down mode. Not sure. So I mean, okay. I think there's I think that some people like the model of they never stop buying. They always need more. They always want to be buying. Whereas I don't necessarily subscribe to that model. I do like the thought of taking back more of my time, like paying these down. You look at like 50 single family rentals that are paid off and they're producing $2,500 a month. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's more money I can spend. So it's like, what does chasing more give me? Unless I'm just loving doing it, and that might be the case, but beyond that, there's nothing else that it can do for my life.
Yeah. Man, it's interesting, and I want to highlight this not from a comparison perspective, because I want to be crystal clear with everyone. I'd love to give credit to whoever said this, but there's a quote that's always resonated with me, that comparison is the thief of joy. And to give you a little bit of backstory to that, you and I we met in a high level mastermind surrounded by a lot of really smart people building big businesses, striving for more.
Yeah.
And when I first joined, I fell into that trap saying, hey, I need to scale. I need to go big. And then now, having been on the other side of it, that's never really what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people, while they make a lot of money, don't necessarily keep a lot of money or don't net a lot of that money. I just finished yesterday. I sold off my last single family rental because I've decided to just focus on storage, but there's multiple paths to build wealth. You have to figure out what makes sense for you. Absolutely. How do you think about rentals with leverage, i.e. debt? You just talked about the thought of having 40, 50 rental portfolio that's free and clear. There's a lot of different schools of thought, man, when it comes to, hey, debt, leverage, versus there's a couple of people in my network and in our ecosystem that it's like, dude, I don't want debt. Like, I don't care that I can't grow more because I'm not leveraging, right? And so you have these two different schools of thought, and I've been following you long enough and we've built a relationship, so I know where you stand. But for the benefit of the audience, how do you think about those people that are listening to the show that want to build a single family rental portfolio? And then talk about your mindset when it comes to leverage versus not leveraging.
Yeah. So first of all, it's a great question. So I think that debt in the beginning is good. I think that it's very, very hard without a massive income producing business or income stream. It's very hard to buy in with no debt.
Yep.
Most people just don't have that type of cash laying around. So debt gives us our way in. And if you buy well and buy with debt, oftentimes you can get in with very little down. As we've moved up into a nicer asset class or nicer single family homes, in the suburbs, our average house value is getting closer to that $350,000 range. I'd say 300, 350. We can't buy those as well. So we're having to come out of pocket to acquire those deals. But that's what the wholesaling business is for. So I would say, like what my mentor told me, he said the fastest way to get to $10 million is to acquire $10 million worth of debt and then get it paid off, versus trying to accumulate $10,000 worth of cash. For most people, they won't do that in their lifetime, but most people could have a $10 million net worth if they acquire $10 million worth of real estate and let it get paid off. So I think that acquiring real estate with debt is smart in the beginning. It's wise. There's so many different advantages to it. But I think that I don't want to hand my kids down a bunch of debt, right? Like I don't want them to have that obligation, that stress. I don't want them to have to worry about making all those payments. I just want them to reap the benefits of the cash flow and everything else that comes with. So for me, it's like, by the time I want to retire, I like the thought of them all being paid off. So it doesn't all have to happen quickly. I think that when we're in the building phase, we're building it, we're putting debt on it. And then as we hit the peak of whatever our building phase might look like, then we start to kind of just as in the age of our lives, take that same pattern. As we start to go down the hill, then we start to say, okay, we're going to let some of these go. We just don't need any anymore. We don't want that much to manage. We're going to start on, debt reduction, getting that debt paid down, just to have a simpler life and less to manage. So I think it's, most wealthy people that do not have the ego anymore. I think, going back to the mastermind and some of the people that are in that, they still have a lot of ego. They're young, they're filled with testosterone. It's like they want more, more of everything. Whereas most of the time, wise investors, you never hear them talk about wanting more debt. They don't, that's not in their vocabulary. Occasionally you got the Grant Cardones of the world that are the rare breeds, but most of them don't. Most of them talk about wanting simplicity. They're focused on living their life, traveling, spending time with their grandkids, all that stuff. They don't want the obligations that come with more debt. So I would say as we enter that next phase, which might be, maybe late 50s, 60s and beyond, in my opinion, it makes sense to start simplifying.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And don't get me wrong, I posed the question because there's always two sides, and I have built, the assets I've acquired have been through debt. The single families I've sold off, that's given me a jump. It's allowed me to accelerate my wealth. But with that being said, let's not pretend like any level of debt doesn't introduce some risk. Yeah. And there are some people that have a different mindset where they just don't want that risk. And it's not just about the ROI, right? There's other things that are important to them. So you just have to figure out what kind of works for you. But I agree with you, especially when you're starting out. It's hard to do it without debt. Now, there are, and this isn't the purpose of this podcast, right? But there are creative strategies. One of the rentals that I bought, I found the deal, negotiated the deal, and managed the property manager. And I got 25% equity and cash flow in that single family. And I found a partner to come in and fund the rehab. And I had no money out of my pocket. So you can do equity type deals like that. It's just going to probably require a lot more. But there's creative ways that you guys can get involved, right? So last question I have about debt, and I'm sorry, about building a rental portfolio. And then I want to transition into lead gen as we start to kind of wind down the show because, lead gen is one of those topics that people are always like wanting to, like, what's working? What's the next, what's the next marketing channel? What's this? What's that? So I want to ask you about that. But before that, you think about the quality of the asset, I think a little bit differently than some other people. Some people I know look at what it's going to cash flow on paper, and they're willing to go into a C- neighborhood or into a rough part of town because the returns look great on paper. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you focus on B areas, correct? Like better quality assets that you want to keep long-term?
Yeah, A and B class neighborhoods.
Okay, why is that? Because some might argue, well, hey, the returns aren't as good, but like, why have you decided to go focus on A and B versus BC?
Well, when you look at a single family rental, a lot of people are focused on the cash flow. I really don't pay all that much attention to cash flow. It has to be cash flow positive, but sometimes cash flow positive means me paying it down to the point where it's cash flow positive. So I might be totally okay with being $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 out of pocket to get something cash flow positive if it's in an area that I know over a long term is going to give me an incredible ROI. Right. So the ROI of, well, I can get $300 a month cash flow versus 200. Who cares? Like, that's not going to make any difference to my bottom line. Right. But for me, like the real estate goes up in value, attracts tenants, all that based off of where it sits, based off of the land that's underneath the real estate. So I don't go after the house like most people do. I go after the land that's underneath it. I want the best lot in town is basically what I'm looking at. So when I can find the areas of town that have the best appreciation, the best tax rate for that quality of an asset, areas of town that have the best school districts, places that are going to attract the best tenants, like that's where I want to own as much property as I can. Yeah. So even though, yes, it doesn't perform as far as a return or cash flow, it doesn't perform as well as a C-class neighborhood for sure. No argument there. But when you look at the long-term outcome, I mean, it will appreciate at quite literally double the pace of what a C-class neighborhood might. So, when I'm looking at that, I'm looking at the long-term comparison, and I'm buying let's say a $350,000 house. It's going to double in value over the next 15 to 20 years. That's going to be a $700,000 house versus the $100,000 house that's might increase in value by 50%. So now that I've got a $700,000 house versus a $150,000 house.
Yep.
So you do that over the course of 100 deals. That's a massive difference in net worth.
100%. And no, I love that illustration. And quick last follow-up question is for people listening to this, watching this, and they want to start building a rental portfolio. What are some websites, some tools, resources that you might recommend for them to go figure out, hey, what's the best school district? Or, hey, like where, what area, neighborhood, subdivision, generally speaking, gets the best appreciation, historically speaking? Like what are some resources that people might be able to plug into to start doing some of that research so that they can plant their flag on certain zip codes or certain subdivisions?
Yeah, I don't know if I don't really use any websites or anything, but I would say get out and drive your neighborhoods. Get out and drive. One thing you could do This is what I would always have somebody do when they're new to a market is get out there and dissect their market. Meaning, like, you can have your realtor provide you with a list of cash solds. All the houses have sold for cash within a certain time frame. So let's just say 60 to 90 days. And you can break that down by an order of price. So it's going to go from the cheapest up to the most expensive. And so then just get out there and drive all those different addresses. And that's going to take you from basically a D-class neighborhood or a war zone, depending on your area, your city. And it's going to take you all the way up to an A-class step by step. So that's going to help you understand where the different neighborhoods and classes and stuff are. And it's going to really help you understand how to dissect your market.
Yep. Love it, brother. Love it. Well, man, as we start to kind of wind down the show here, lead gen, right? Big topic that we're going to do our best to maybe cram in under 7 minutes here. So obviously there's only but so much we can cover here. But what is working for you today? And let me preface that question with my thinking, and let me know if you have a different viewpoint or feel free to push back. My viewpoint is that most marketing, generally speaking, works if you're consistent and if you work, right? Yeah. So I don't believe in a magic bullet when it comes to marketing. So if you're out there looking for, like, I remember at one point it was ringless voicemails, and then it was text messaging, and then it was this, and then it's always something, right? But like, are you consistent enough with whatever marketing channels you're focused on? So with that being said, what are you doing to generate leads, and what would you advise people when it comes to just generating higher quality leads?
Yes. Well, so first of all, you're 100% right. In fact, in my book that we just got released, that's one of the things I talk about is the silver bullet of not going the silver bullet route. All the marketers and the gurus and stuff are always selling a new silver bullet that is the wonder pill, right? And will it work? Probably to some level, but it's very likely that it will eventually fade off too. So what I say, what I talk about in this book is,
by the way, Mark, let me interrupt you, guys. For those watching on this, but for those listening to the podcast, you can grab it on Amazon. It's called "More Leads, More Deals, More Profits: The Insider Secrets of Real Estate Millionaires," obviously by Mark Lane. Grab it on Amazon. If you're watching this, we have the short form Amazon. Mark is showing it on the screen. It's a white book with black copy. More Leads, More Deals, More Profits. Highly recommend you guys go grab it on Amazon. Support him, and you guys are going to get a wealth of knowledge in that book. So sorry to interrupt, brother. Keep going.
Yeah, all good. Yep. So, but in the book, I talk about that, but it goes into basically the three-legged stool of lead generation, which is prospecting, marketing, and your Dream 100. So if a person implements that strategy, right? Like, and within each of those, within prospecting, there's driving for dollars, there's outbound calls, there's MLS, there's county auctions, online auctions, there's unlimited opportunity right there alone. Then you've got your marketing, and that could be everything from Google ads, direct mail, SEO, billboards, TV, radio, almost unlimited. And then of course, then you've got the Dream 100, and the Dream 100 is building your network of the professionals that the people that you're marketing to are most likely to need help from. So that could be everything from probate attorneys, real estate agents, bankers, foundation companies, like you name it, like anybody that those people are going to call to need help. So when you build out your system and you start to have, maybe you've got 2 or 3 marketing strategies going on. For example, you got direct mail, you've got PPC, you've got SEO. You're running all three of those together. You might be spending $10,000 a month. And of course, you can spend less. And then at the same time, you're doing some prospecting. You're working the MLS daily. You're going to the county auctions once a week, and you're surfing the online auctions, let's say weekly, just seeing if there's anything available there. And then on Dream 100, you're working your Dream 100, and you're adding like one good quality contact per week. That alone, that's a 7-figure business strategy. It's literally exactly what I do. So everybody is going to have a different level of resources, different level of time, staff, all that. So they might take some out, they might add some in, just depending on what a person wants to do. But when we stop trying to buy into silver bullets and we start implementing what I like to call evergreen lead generation strategies, things that are not going to go away, they're going to be around forever. For example, something like direct mail, it's never going to go away. It's always going to be around. Like SEO, it's the internet. It's not going to go away. So there's these different strategies that we use that we're not buying into as we're not gambling and like, well, I hope that this is going to give me a return. Instead, we're saying, I expect this to give me a return. It might not be immediately, but if I do it long enough and I stick with it, it's going to pay me.
Yeah. And that is the silver bullet right there. Consistency. Obviously, it's marketing. So you got to test and tweak and modify. It's not just a straight line to success, but consistency is the bottom line when it comes to marketing. Too many people, man, I think just they scratch the surface of a bunch of different marketing channels, but I like the inch wide and a mile deep on a few. Or, perfect one, move on to the next channel, tweak, model, And so, yeah, guys, highly recommend you check out Mark's book, More Leads, More Deals, More Profits, The Insider Secrets of Real Estate Millionaires. You guys can grab it on Amazon. Mark, I'm assuming if they just search for your name or the title, that should probably pop up on Amazon, right?
Yeah, that should pop up. It's there's been enough sales at this point that it's pretty easily discoverable.
I love it. Awesome, man. Well, brother, man, first and foremost, I'm happy that you're healthier.
Yes.
Obviously, I know you're probably not, back to where you were, and I think you mentioned that you might not be back to where you were. I'd like to hold a positive thought that you can, and even be healthier and stronger, brother. I don't know where your faith lies, man, but for me, like, nothing's impossible with the man upstairs. So
all we can do is keep moving forward.
That's it, man. So, dude, your story is a testament to what's possible, man, when you don't give up. And it was crazy. I appreciate you sharing it. And hopefully your story resonates with people listening to this that ask themselves, hey, do I have even certain things, like we didn't even talk about that, but do I have a life insurance in place? Do I have disability insurance if I'm incapacitated? Like, do I have a trust? Do I have a will? Like, is my family, like, how are they set up if you have a family, if I'm no longer here? And we just never know, man. We just never know, as cliche as it sounds.
I think the best takeaway is just for listeners, is just not to assume that everything's going to go okay and it's going to keep going okay, because eventually it won't. We don't know when that time's going to come. It could be in a week, could be in 50 years, but eventually it's not going to. So just get yourself prepared, and then you kind of got that off the table.
That's right. And the last comment, Mark, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, man, is that for people that are doing really, really well and they're quote unquote crushing it and they're making a bunch of money, make sure that you're being wise with that earned income or with that money you're making. Don't just spend it as if it's going to be there and you're going to get it again tomorrow, again and again, because back to Mark's point, you just never know. So make sure that you're investing for the future as well, and you're just not living for today. So, guys, with that being said, we just crossed over the 8-year anniversary of the Flip Empire show on June 6th. Crazy to me, Mark, dude, that June 6th, 2016, I recorded my first show with my buddy Chris Chico. And if you would have told me I'd be doing this consistently every single week for 8 years, I probably would have laughed at you. Mm-hmm. So, awesome. And I mentioned that not to pat myself on the back, because it's about the audience and it's about the people that I've been able to interview and connect with. The show wouldn't be possible without you guys. So big, genuine thank you for subscribing, for tuning in, for plugging in. Share this episode with people who you think it could resonate with. Or I'm always a believer of being a funnel for good content. You hear something, share it. You hear something, share it. So that's a big thank you to us. And then reach out to us. Reach out to Mark. I'm sure if you look for Mark on Facebook, you can probably find him, Mark Lane.
Yeah.
And then definitely grab, obviously, the book on Amazon. So, Mark, appreciate you sharing your story, man. And guys, I look forward to connecting with you on the next show. Take care. One last thing before you go. If you have been listening to the show for a while and or you have been getting value from the show, I would be 100% honored if you would share this show with a friend, or maybe share it with somebody that you think could benefit from this. It's my mission, it's my cause, it's my purpose through Flip Empire to impact and touch people's lives, to help people and in their businesses. So it would be an honor if you would be willing to share this episode. And one last thing, make sure that you're subscribed so that you get notified every Monday and Thursday when shows get released. I look forward to connecting with you on the next one. Until then, have a great day.